Hey there, this is Perch. A topic that comes up every now and then is the idea of how time passes in comics, or more appropriately, how time doesn't pass in comics. This is a thing that seems to irritate like a very small amount of people, fans who just can't quite seem to get over it, or I don't know, they just get really bent around about the topic. And it's the idea that you say you have like Fantastic Four, and the Fantastic Four got their powers from going in a rocket ship during the Cold War, early in the Cold War. And I mean, the 60s, basically. And so, by all accounts, like Sue Storm should be what, like 70 now? Is that about right? 70 pushing 80? And yet, she's obviously not. And comics exist in their own kind of bubble of time. You had Captain America in a storyline that was clearly Nixon, and you've just had a lot of things through the years with Batman and with Superman and with Marvel and DC, and you have this idea of time is passing kind of in its own way, but it exists in a weird universe because the comics really want to reflect modern events. They want to have you know they want to have Iron Man kind of as a contemporary, hanging out with new technology and VR and all this kind of stuff. They want to have Iron Man meet Obama, or was that Thunderbolts? Anyway, they put it this way: they want to have him meet and interact with current political figures and current celebrities. But at the same time, if Iron Man's origin was back fighting, in Vietnam or fighting in that area in that era, then it just doesn't make sense. Basically the characters are moving through time as we are moving through time, but they're not aging, and they're just kind of staying consistent. Everybody around the characters aren't aging. Somebody put forward a theory that hey, you could explain this by just saying the superheroes don't age. That they just remain the same, and that's an interesting idea. I mean, sure. But then you've got to have things like, Pepper Potts is like Tony's grandma. And I mean, you have the supporting cast would be aging, and plus it'd be really grim too if the superheroes are like saving the world, but they're watching kind of all their family and friends and everybody who doesn't have powers just die. That would be kind of a bummer. Um, but this is one of those things that is true in movies and true in comics where there's really no value in thinking about it, in the sense that you know the alternative would be we age the characters. Okay. Another alternative is we reboot characters constantly. We have new number one issues in order to keep them young every 5 to 10 years. That's not a good option at all. You lose a lot of history. And so, no matter how you cut it, really, I mean, you can do a number of like shenanigans around having like a storyline where a bubble of the reality kind of. I mean, you could get yourself into really silly situations really fast. And the best answer is simply just let it go. Just don't worry about it. Go ahead and let the characters exist in this kind of out of time way that doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense, and move on. It doesn't need to, it's a problem that does not need to be solved. There's a good friend of mine who, that was his quote. He would say that, this is a problem that doesn't need to be solved. And all meant was, this is something we can certainly talk about, something we can debate, something we can get really ticked off about or frustrated by, but there's no real benefit to solving it. The solutions are either awkward or weird or just give no value. And at the end of the day, there's no value to aging the superheroes up. There's no value to dumping history. It's actually kind of a cool thing that, if you think like an educator, that you've got, Captain America and Superman fighting the Nazis, that you have the characters kind of helping with 9/11, that you have Iron Man being kind of birthed during Vietnam, that you have all these kind of moments of real life history and how our heroes would interact with it. If we decide to shorten that up to only caring about 10 years worth of history, then we dump a lot. And I think there are people who would kind of like that, because there is, an ongoing effort at times to discard our history as a as a civilization, that only the present matters. And can you imagine a world without cell phones? I can't actually. It was way more relaxing. But this is a thing about comics that is unique and cool. It's something that can't be replicated in the movies. It's impossible for a film to give us this benefit. And there's something cool about that. There's something that's just kind of charming about the fact that comics get to live in their own bubble because they're drawings. The characters don't age. They can be timeless, and that's great. I feel pretty strongly about this. As you can tell, I mean, sometimes I can see different opinions and different ideas, but in this case, I've had this argument so many times with different people. There's just no value in it. There's no benefit to doing anything other than what they're doing right now. It's one of those things that just works fine. Um, I mean, yeah, that does mean as a reader you can sit there and go, well, wait a minute. There's no physical reality way that 1 plus 1 equals 2 here. It sets up very strange things. But again, what does it matter? If you're reading Iron Man from the 60s on, if you're going back and seeing all those stories and going through that whole journey, my theory is that whatever discomfort you have from the fact that Iron Man doesn't seem to be aging and these stories seem weirdly timeless, however weird that happens to be, the benefit of being able to read through decades and eras of characters and how they interact in different situations, seeing all these different takes on them and seeing the character's personality and parts of them reflected through kind of the lens of what was going on at the time. I think that's a huge benefit. Now, I don't think I'm going to represent his argument well, so I won't go into it heavily. But this is one of those things that Eric Larson has talked about. Of he does aging through his comic mostly. He's not as strict about it as he would have you believe, but he does age his characters, and he does believe in don't just do the same static quo thing. Have shakeups. Have children take the mantle of their fathers. Have these different things happen, and that's fine. I think if you're a writer and you have an idea of the story to tell, then great. The reason that works for Savage Dragon better is because Eric Larson has always been the creator and has held his hands on the reins of that creation. If it was some company's character and some company's title, and they were switching out writers every 20 issues or so, and artists coming and going, then I think holding true to that vision is a lot tougher and a lot poorer. I think the result would be bad when it's one singular person's vision, whether it's him or Dave Sim with Cerebus or The Walking Dead, any of these kinds of titles. If you have a single creative vision, then great. You can deal with things like time jumps and other things in your own way. But in general, I think Spider Man, Captain America, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Flash, all these characters, I think they exist best when they are timeless, even if that does create a weird little paradox in how they're read. Anyway, that's my opinion. What's yours? Leave me a comment. Let me know. Like, subscribe, get notified, tell a friend, follow me on social media at Comic Perch, and thanks for listening.